The wind out here doesn't howl, it screams. It's a high-pitched tearing sound that reminds you that you're 200 miles from the nearest Tim Hortons and about 1,000 miles from God. I sat inside the reinforced steel box of Guard Booth Alpha, my boots resting on the heater that rattled like a dying lung. Outside, the thermometer read 40 below zero. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes in under a minute. Your eyes water, and the tears turn to ice crystals before they hit your cheeks. It's a lethal and different world out there. Inside, it smelled of stale percolator coffee, gun oil, and the sharp tang of my own nervous sweat. This was Outpost Joe. To the locals, what few of them existed this far north. It was the bridge to nowhere. It spanned the MacKenzie River, a massive, churning artery of black water that refused to freeze completely, even in the dead of winter. The bridge itself was a monolith of rusted iron and concrete, stretching out into the thick, freezing fog until it simply vanished. You couldn't see the other side. You weren't supposed to care about the other side. My job was simple on paper: sit in the booth, monitor the sensors, and ensure that the gate remained down from dusk until dawn. I took a sip of the sludge in my mug, grimacing as the bitter liquid hit my tongue. It was 下午5:45 but the sun had dipped below the horizon hours ago. Darkness in the Northern Territories is heavy. It presses against the glass like a physical weight, trying to crush the little bubble of artificial light you've built for yourself. I checked the monitors. 4 screens glowing with green night vision static. Screen 1 showed the approach road empty snow-packed gravel. Screen 2 showed the gate a heavy yellow and black striped barrier arm, reinforced with steel cables. Screen 3 showed the river below black soup. Screen 4 was just static, cameras on the north side having frozen over weeks ago. The phone on the wall buzzed. It was an old red rotary phone, a direct hardline to command. It was the only thing in the booth that didn't look like it had been bought at a military surplus auction. I picked it up. "Sergeant Miller," I said, my voice sounding rusty in the small space. "Sunset is confirmed, Sergeant," a voice crackled on the other end. It wasn't the usual dispatcher. It was a synthesized voice, flat and devoid of humanity. "Initiate night protocol. Gate down, lights out." "Gate is down," I replied, glancing at the lever. "But lights out, sir. Visibility is 0. If a truck comes barreling down that ice road, orders are absolute, Sergeant," the voice cut in. "Lights out. Let nothing cross. If you see movement, do not engage verbally. If they speak to you, do not listen. If they ask to come in, do not open." The line clicked dead. I held the receiver for a moment, the drone of the dial tone mixing with the wind outside. Lights out. They wanted me to sit in the dark. I reached for the switch panel. One by one, I killed the floodlights illuminating the bridge. The darkness rushed in instantly, swallowing the iron girders, the road, and the gate. Now, the only light came from the faint green glow of the monitors and the red standby lead on my shotgun. I was alone in the dark, guarding a bridge that led to nothing, waiting for something that wasn't supposed to exist. And then I saw the headlights. The headlights were faint at first, 2 pinpricks of yellow light, cutting through the swirling snow on the north side of the bridge. They bobbed up and down, suggesting a vehicle moving slowly over rough terrain. My stomach tightened. No one lived on the north side. There were no settlements, no mines, no logging camps. Just millions of acres of frozen taiga and the ruins of a town that had been scrubbed from the maps in the 80s. I pulled the heavy binder from the shelf labeled Standard Operating Procedure. Outpost Joe. The cover was stained with coffee rings and something darker that looked disturbingly like dried blood. I flipped it open to the section marked Night Protocol. The bureaucratic language of the military usually brings me comfort. It's orderly. It makes sense. Check fluid levels. Report mileage. Secure perimeter. But as I read the list for the night shift, the comfort evaporated, replaced by a cold knot of dread in my gut. These weren't standard orders. These were the scribblings of a lunatic, typed up on official letterhead. Rule Yi. Maintain visual discipline. Do not look directly at the water below the bridge for longer than 5 seconds. The refraction of light on the ice can cause visual hallucinations. If you hear splashing, do not investigate. If you hear voices calling for help from the river, close your blinds immediately. Rule R. The dental check. All travelers attempting to cross from north to south must be visually verified. Do not rely on identification cards. Do not rely on facial recognition. You must ask the traveler to smile. A genuine human smile involves the contraction of the orbicularis oculi muscle. If the smile appears too wide or reveals an excess of teeth, deny entry. Initiate protocol silence. Rule Sen. Protocol silence. If a vehicle approaches with no license plate, or if the plates are obscured by snow, do not speak over the intercom. Do not turn on the floodlights. Lay flat on the floor of the booth and wait for the vehicle to depart. Do not engage. They cannot see you if you do not acknowledge them. Rule Su. Pedestrian crossing. Under no circumstances is the gate to be raised for a pedestrian. Humans do not walk across the MacKenzie in winter. If a pedestrian appears at the window, assume it is hostile. Do not make eye contact. Rule Wu. The supply truck. Resupply occurs on Tuesdays at 08:00 小时 hours. If a supply truck arrives at night, verify the driver's left hand. Corporal Davis wears a gold wedding band. He never removes it. If the finger is bare, fire at will. I slammed the binder shut. The headlights were getting closer now. They were halfway across the bridge, the beams illuminating the falling snow like sparks from a welder's torch. It was a sedan, an old beat-up thing that looked like a Honda Civic from the 90s. It moved with a terrifying silence. No engine roar, no crunch of tires on snow. Just the lights gliding closer. I checked the clock. 下午11点, not a supply truck, not a patrol. I reached for the intercom button, my finger hovering over the plastic switch. The car rolled to a stop 10 feet from the gate. The engine cut out. The headlights died. Now there was just a dark shape sitting in front of the barrier. I waited. The wind screamed. Then the driver's side door opened. A figure stepped out into the blizzard. It was small, slight. It looked like a woman in a heavy parka. She stumbled toward the booth, waving her arms. "Please," she screamed, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Help me, my car died, I'm freezing." I looked at the binder. Rule Su. Humans do not walk across the MacKenzie. But she looked so normal. She was shivering violently. I could see her breath puffing in the air. I hesitated. My hand moved from the intercom to the gate release. It was pure instinct, the urge to help someone in distress. "Don't do it, Miller," I whispered to myself. "Check the list." I pressed the intercom button instead. "Step into the light," I commanded, my voice booming through the external speaker. "Let me see your face." The woman stopped. She looked up at the booth. Her face was pale, streaked with tears. She looked terrified. "Please," she sobbed. "I just want to go home." She looked so human. "Smile," I said. The request hung in the frozen air like a bad joke. Smile. It felt cruel to ask a woman who was visibly freezing to death to perform for me, but the binder was clear. Rule R was absolute. The dental check. Through the thick, bulletproof glass of the booth, I watched her reaction. She didn't look confused. She didn't get angry or ask why. She just stopped crying instantly. 1 second, she was a sobbing wreck, her shoulders shaking with grief. The next, she stood perfectly still, her arms dropping to her sides. The transition was jarring, like a video glitching between two different frames. "Did you hear me?" I barked into the microphone, my grip tightening on the handset. "I need you to smile for the camera. It's protocol." She took a step closer to the light. The single halogen bulb I had left on above the gate illuminated her features. She was pretty in a plain, unassuming way. Brown hair matted with snow, pale skin that looked almost translucent in the harsh light, and eyes that were a piercing shade of blue. She wore a heavy red parka that looked too big for her frame. "I'm so cold," she whispered. Her voice didn't sound like it was coming from the speaker. It sounded like it was right next to my ear, intimate and pleading. "Just open the gate, please." "Smile," I repeated, my heart hammering against my ribs. Last warning. She looked down at her boots, shuffling in the snow. Then, slowly, she lifted her head. The corners of her mouth twitched, upward. It started as a small, hesitant grin, a shy smile. If I had seen it in a coffee shop or a grocery store, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. It was disarming. "See," she said, the smile widening. "I'm just a person, just like you." My hand hovered over the gate release lever. She was right. I was being paranoid. This was a civilian who had gotten lost, maybe took a wrong turn onto the old logging roads, and ended up on the north side. If I left her out there, she would die in minutes. Okay, I muttered, exhaling a breath. I didn't realize ID'd been holding. Okay, I'm opening the... I stopped. The smile kept growing. It didn't stop at her cheeks. The corners of her mouth stretched further, pulling the skin taut until it looked like wet tissue paper about to tear. The smile reached her ears, and then she opened her lips. It wasn't teeth, not normal teeth. Her mouth was filled with rows of them. Small, needle sharp, and translucent, like the teeth of a deep-sea fish. They were layered, receding back into her throat, moving independently of each other. They clicked softly as her jaw unhinged, dropping lower than any human jaw should be able to go. The smile was now a gaping maw that took up the bottom half of her face. I recoiled, slamming my back against the rear wall of the booth. Jesus Christ, the woman didn't move. She just stood there, holding that impossible, horrific grin, staring up at me with those piercing blue eyes that hadn't blinked once. "Let me in," she said, but the voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a guttural, wet sound, garbled by the rows of teeth. "It's cold out here, Miller. We want to be warm." She knew my name. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my system. I grabbed a shotgun from the rack, pumping a shell into the chamber. The loud clack-clack echoed in the small booth. "Back away from the gate," I shouted, aiming the barrel through the glass. "Get back or I will open fire." The creature, because that's what she was, didn't flinch. Her expression shifted in an instant. The sorrow was gone. The pleading was gone. Now there was only rage. Her face contorted, the skin rippling as if something was moving underneath it. She let out a shriek that sounded like tearing metal and threw herself at the barrier arm. She hit the steel gate with enough force to shake the entire booth. Bang. I flinched, my finger tightening on the trigger. She hit it again. Bang. We stopped. She looked up at me one last time, her mouth snapping shut, hiding the rows of needles. She looked normal again, just a woman in the snow. "You're not a very good host," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. She turned on her heel and walked back to the car. She didn't run. She didn't stumble. She walked with a fluid, predatory grace. She got into the driver's seat, and the sedan reversed. It shot backward into the darkness at 40 miles an hour, disappearing into the fog as quickly as it arrived. I stood there shaking, the shotgun heavy in my hands. I looked at the binder, Rule R, the dental check. It had saved my life, but as I watched the red taillights fade, I realized something terrifying. She hadn't reversed because I threatened her. She reversed because she was testing the perimeter. She was checking the locks, and now she knew I was alone. I stood at the window for a long time after the taillights vanished, my breath fogging the glass in frantic, uneven puffs. The adrenaline was still coursing through me, making my hands shake so badly I almost dropped the shotgun. I set it down on the desk with a clatter and grabbed the radio handset. "Command," I barked, my voice cracking. "This is Alpha. I have a code. I don't even know what the code is." I had a hostile at the gate, attempted breach. Static. Just the white noise of the Arctic night. "Command, do you copy?" Nothing. The line was dead. Or maybe it wasn't dead. Maybe they just weren't listening. Protocol silence. Had I triggered it by speaking to the creature? I sank into the chair, rubbing my temples. The image of that mouth, those rows of shifting, needle-like teeth, was burned into my retinas. It was biological. It wasn't a hallucination brought on by isolation. I looked at the binder again. Rule R. Why did they call it the dental check? It sounded so clinical, so mundane, like a dentist appointment. But whoever wrote these rules knew exactly what lived on the north side. They knew what those things looked like when they dropped the mask. I poured myself another cup of coffee. My hands were steadying, but my mind was racing. She knew my name. Miller, she had said. "We want to be warm. How?" I had never been to the north side. I had transferred here from a post in Vancouver 2 weeks ago. My file was classified. My name tag was inside my jacket. Unless, I looked at the radio. The synthesized voice earlier, orders our absolute sergeant. They were listening. They, the things in the dark, were listening to our comms. They were learning. A sudden thump against the side of the booth made me jump, spilling hot coffee onto my lap. I cursed, brushing the liquid off my pants, and grabbed the shotgun again. It came from the riverside, the side facing the drop. I moved to the window, peering down. It was pitch black. The floodlights were off, per my orders. I couldn't see anything but the faint reflection of the booth's interior lights on the glass. Don't look at the water. Rule ye. But I had to know. What if she had climbed down? What if she was climbing up the support pilings? I pressed my face against the cold glass, cupping my hands around my eyes to block out the reflection. Below me, the abyss yawned. The wind whistled through the steel girders. Then I heard it, a splash. Not the rhythmic lapping of water against ice, a heavy, deliberate splash. Like something diving, or something surfacing. If you hear splashing, do not investigate. My hand went to the spotlight control. Just a quick flash. Just 1 second to see if I was imagining things. I shouldn't. I knew I shouldn't, but fear is a powerful motivator, and curiosity is a death sentence. I flipped a switch. A beam of high-intensity light cut through the darkness, illuminating the black water 100 feet below. The ice was broken near the central piling. Chunks of it bobbed in the current, and moving through the water just beneath the surface was a shape. It was pale, white as bone, and it was massive. It wasn't a fish. It wasn't a seal. It looked like a tangle of limbs. Arms, legs, dozens of them, fused together into a long, undulating mass. It moved with a terrifying speed, swimming against the current, heading straight for the concrete pillar that supported my booth. As the light hit it, the mass stopped. It rolled over in the water. A face looked up at me. It was identical to the woman's face. The same brown hair, the same blue eyes. But this face was 10 feet wide, and it was smiling. The clang reverberated through the steel floor, vibrating up through the soles of my boots. It was the sound of a heavy body landing on the great wet, heavy and purposeful. I spun toward the door, racking the shotgun slide again, just for the reassurance of the sound. The door was a heavy steel slab with a small reinforced porthole. I had locked it. I had double-checked the deadbolt at the start of my shift, but locks keep out honest people. They don't keep out whatever was on that catwalk. I backed away until I hit the desk, my eyes fixed on the porthole. Condensation dripped down the glass inside, but outside it was frost and darkness. Sergeant Miller, a voice called from outside. It was muffled by the wind and the steel, but distinct. It wasn't the monster's voice. It wasn't the synthesized voice. Miller, open up. It's freezing out here. It was Dave, the driver of the weekly supply truck. Dave, who brought me fresh coffee grounds and old issues of Car and Driver. Dave, who I had watched a hockey game with 2 weeks ago in the break room back at base. I lowered the shotgun slightly. Dave, yeah, it's me. The truck stalled out halfway across. I had to walk the rest of the way. Come on, man, let me in. My mind raced. A stalled truck explained why I hadn't seen headlights. It explained why he was on foot, and it was Tuesday supply day, but it was Shaoxi and Centerfin. Resupply was at Imbadingning. Why are you here so late, Dave? I shouted through the door. Dispatch screwed up the manifest. Had to double back for the diesel. Look, I'm freezing my nuts off out here. Are you gonna let me in or what? It sounded exactly like him. The cadence, the annoyance, the specific way he complained. I stepped closer to the door. I wanted to believe it. God, I wanted to believe it. Being alone in this booth with monsters outside was hell. Having another human being here, someone with a gun, someone to watch my back would be salvation. I reached for the deadbolt. My hand touched the cold metal. Rule wool. Verify the driver's left hand. I stopped. Dave, I said, my voice trembling. Look through the porthole. I need to ID you. Are you serious? It's me. We played poker last week. I took $40 off you. Just do it. A face appeared in the porthole. It was Dave. The bushy beard, the red nose from the cold, the blue jay's beanie pulled low over his forehead. He looked pissed off. Happy now, he growled, his breath fogging the glass. Put your left hand on the glass, I ordered. Palm out. You've got to be kidding me. Is this some kind of hazing ritual for the new guy? Do it, or I leave you out there. Dave rolled his eyes, a gesture so human it almost broke my resolve. He raised his left hand and pressed it against the thick glass. I shined my flashlight on it. 5 fingers, dirty fingernails, calloused skin. But the ring finger was bare, no gold band, No tan line where a ring used to be. I stared at the hand. I remembered Dave talking about his wife, Sarah. He never took that ring off. He said his fingers had gotten too fat over the years and it was stuck. He joked that He'd have to be buried with it. "Where's your ring, Dave?" I whispered. The face in the window didn't change. The expression remained annoyed, but the eyes went dead. "I lost it," Dave said. "You said it was stuck. You said you couldn't take it off." "I cut it off," Dave replied. His voice changed. The annoyance vanished. It became flat, monotone. "I cut the finger off, Miller, and then I grew a new one." The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. I grew a new one. Before I could process the horror of it, Dave slammed his fist against the porthole. The reinforced glass didn't break, but a spiderweb fracture appeared in the center. I stumbled back, raising the shotgun. "Get away from the door," Dave smiled. It wasn't the jagged, multi-toothed grin of the woman. It was worse. It was Dave's smile, but stretched too wide, the skin tearing at the corners of his mouth. "Open the door, Miller. We have supplies for you. We brought you fresh meat." He laughed a wet, gurgling sound and disappeared from the window. I heard heavy footsteps retreating down the metal catwalk. Then, silence. I stood there, heart pounding, waiting for the next blow. But nothing hit the door. Instead, a blinding light flooded the booth. Headlights. Massive, high beams cut through the darkness from the bridge. The supply truck. It hadn't stalled. It was sitting right there, idling just beyond the gate. The engine roared a deep, diesel rumble that shook the floorboards. I rushed to the front window. The truck was a behemoth, an armored transport designed for the ice roads. But something was wrong. The cab was dark. I couldn't see a driver. Then the truck lurched forward. It hit the barrier arm. Crunch. The steel cable snapped like a guitar string. The yellow and black arm bent in half and flew off into the darkness. The truck didn't stop. It rolled forward until its grill was inches from my window, filling my entire field of view with chrome and blinding light. The air horn blasted a deafening, prolonged scream of compressed air that made me drop to my knees, hands over my ears. Hoo-hoo-unk. It went on for 10 seconds. 20. It wasn't a signal. It was an assault. When it finally cut off, my ears were ringing. I looked up. The driver's side door of the truck swung open. A figure stepped out onto the running board. It was Dave again. Or rather, another Dave. This one was wearing the same clothes, the same beanie, but his left arm. His left arm was a mass of writhing tentacles. He raised a limb, waving at me. The tentacles flexed and curled, gripping the door frame. "Delivery," the thing shouted. I realized then what was happening. They weren't just mimicking us. They were mocking us. They understood our rituals, the supply run, the shift change, and they were twisting them into a theater of cruelty. I crawled to the desk and grabbed the radio handset. "Mayday, Mayday, Outpost Joe is under siege. Hostiles have breached the gate. I repeat, gate is down." Static then, a click. "We know, Miller," the synthesized voice said. "We are watching. Send backup, send the convoy." "There is no convoy, Miller." The convoy was us. The radio calls were us. The supply truck is us. The voice paused. "You are the only thing that isn't us." A heavy thud shook the roof of the booth. Then another thump. Something had jumped from the top of the truck onto the roof of my station. I looked up at the steel ceiling. The metal groaned under immense weight. Claws dragged across the roof, screeching like nails on a chalkboard. They were on top of me. I scrambled to the control panel on the wall. There was a red button encased in plastic emergency shutters. I smashed the plastic case with the butt of my shotgun and slammed the button. Hydraulic hiss filled the room. Heavy steel plates began to slide down over the windows. Clang, clang, clang. Darkness swallowed the booth as the shutters locked into place. The blinding headlights were gone. The face of Dave was gone. Now, I was sealed inside a steel coffin, but the sounds outside didn't stop. They got louder, scratching on the roof, banging on the walls. The sound of metal being peeled back, and then a new sound. From the ventilation shaft above my head, unscrew. Unscrew. Someone or something was manually turning the bolts on the roof vent. I aimed the shotgun straight up. "Come and get some," I whispered, my voice trembling. The vent cover popped off and fell to the floor with a clang. A hand reached down through the hole. It wasn't a tentacle. It wasn't a claw. It was a human hand, pale, delicate, wearing a gold wedding band on the ring finger. "Miller," a soft voice called from the vent. "It's me, Sarah. Dave's wife, please help me, is hurting me." It was a lie. I knew it was a lie. But the ring looked real. The hand dangled from the vent, the gold band glinting in the faint red light of my shotgun's lead. The voice pleading from the darkness above was soft, terrified, and heartbreakingly human. "Please," the voice sobbed. "He's changing. He's not Dave anymore." "Pull me down, hurry." I stared at the hand, Sarah. I had never met Sarah, but I had seen her picture in Dave's wallet. I knew she lived in Edmonton. I knew she was a nurse. There was zero reason for her to be on top of a bridge, in the Arctic Circle in the middle of the night. But the fear sounded so genuine, my brain rebelled. Logic fought against instinct. Rule Wu, verify the hand. The hand had the ring. The ring was the verify. "Show your face," I shouted at the ceiling. "If you're Sarah, show your face." The hand retracted slightly. "I can't fit through. He's holding my legs. Just grab my hand." I stepped onto the desk, reaching up. I hesitated. The vent was small, maybe 10 inches wide. Too small for a person to crawl through, but big enough for an arm. As my fingers brushed the tips of hers, I noticed something. The skin on the hand wasn't smooth. It was wrinkled, loose, like a glove that was 2 sizes too big. And the smell, it wafted down from the open vent, a stench of ammonia and old copper. The same smell I imagined the river monster had. I yanked my hand back. "You're not her." The sobbing stopped instantly. The hand didn't retract. It inflated. The loose skin suddenly pulled tight as something underneath expanded. The fingers lengthened, cracking audibly as new joints formed. The gold ring snapped under the pressure, pinging off the metal ductwork. "Smart boy," the voice hissed. It wasn't Sarah anymore. It was a chorus of voices layered over each other. The arm shot down, stretching unnaturally long 3 feet, 4 feet grabbing for my throat. I fell backward off the desk, hitting the floor hard. The hand snatched at the air where my head had been, claws tearing through the fabric of my chair. I raised the shotgun. Boom. The blast echoed deafeningly in the small metal box. The buckshot hit the arm at the elbow joint. It didn't bleed red. Black ichor sprayed across the desk and walls. The arm severed, the hand falling onto the desk, where it twitched and grasped like a dying spider. A scream from the roof, high-pitched and inhuman, shook the dust from the ceiling tiles. The stump of the arm retracted into the vent with a wet slurping sound. Then came the sound of tearing. Not metal, flesh. Above me on the roof, something was ripping itself apart. Sheesh, luck, pop, tear. It sounded like wet Velcro being pulled apart slowly. His shedding, I realized with horror. Dave hadn't just been mimicking a trucker. He had been wearing him. The creature inside had grown too big for its disguise. Heavy impacts dented the roof plates. The metal groaned and bowed inward. I scrambled to the corner of the room, reloading the shotgun with shaking hands. Click-clack. The severed hand on the desk stopped twitching. It began to dissolve, melting into a puddle of black sludge that smoked as it ate through the varnish of the desk. From outside, the sounds of the siege intensified. It wasn't just one creature anymore. I heard scrabbling on the shutters, thumping on the door. The sound of wet palms slapping against the steel walls. They were swarming. The radio crackled to life again. "Miller," the synthesized voice said. "You hurt the carrier. That was rude." "Come down here and tell me yourself," I screamed. "We don't need to," the voice replied. "We are already inside." I looked at the puddle of black sludge on the desk. It wasn't just melting the wood. It was moving. A thin, black tendril rose from the mess, swaying like a cobra, orienting itself toward me. The breach wasn't the door. The breach was the biology itself. I watched the black tendril rise from the desk, mesmerizing and horrifying in the dim red light. It wasn't just a liquid, it was alive. It sensed the heat of my body. It sensed the carbon dioxide I was exhaling in panic. I didn't think. I acted. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall, mount a heavy gold canister. I pulled the pin and unleashed a blast of freezing white fog directly onto the sludge. The tendril hissed, recoiling as the extreme cold hit it. The black liquid froze instantly, turning brittle and gray. It shattered like glass as the force of the spray hit it, crumbling into inert dust. Cold, I whispered. They hate the cold. It made sense. The river wasn't their natural habitat. It was their prison. They lived under the ice because it insulated them. The surface to 40 below air was hostile to their biology. That's why they wore skin suits. That's why they wanted inside the warm booth. I looked at the heater rattling in the corner. It was cranking out warmth, keeping the booth at a cozy 60 degrees. To me, it was comfort. To them, it was an invitation. I ran to the thermostat and ripped the dial off the wall. Then I kicked the heater unit until the pilot light died. The silence that followed was heavy. The hum of the fan died. The warmth began to bleed away instantly. "Let's see how you like it," I muttered, shivering already. I grabbed my parka from the hook and zipped it up tight, pulling my balaclava over my face. If I was going to survive this siege, I had to turn my sanctuary into a freezer. Outside, the banging slowed. The frantic scratching on the shutters became sluggish. The creatures sensed the temperature drop, but they didn't leave thump, 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 circling the booth like wolves waiting for a fire to die out. I retreated to the corner, wedged between the lockers and the wall, shotgun across my knees. I checked my ammo. 12 shells left in the bandolier, 4 in the tube. Not enough for an army. I needed a weapon that didn't run out of bullets. I looked at the soft binder lying on the floor. I picked it up and flipped to the back. Emergency procedures. There was a section titled Sieges and Containment Breaches, in the event of a total perimeter loss. E. Secure the booth. Our initiate distress beacon silent. Sen. Should containment fail, activate Protocol Scorch. Protocol Scorch. I scanned the page. It referenced a secondary panel under the floorboards. A failsafe. I dropped to my knees, shoving the rubber mat aside. There was a small recessed handle in the steel floor plating. I yanked it up. Beneath was a small compartment containing a heavy red lever and a keypad. Demolition Charges Bridge supports Süße. My breath caught in my throat. The bridge was rigged. The military hadn't just built a checkpoint. They had built a kill switch. If the things from the north side ever tried to cross in force, the bridge could be dropped into the river. But the keypad, it required a 5-digit code. I looked at the binder. No code. I looked at the radio. "Command," I whispered into the handset. "I need the Scorch code." Static, then the voice returned. But it wasn't the synthesized voice. It wasn't Dave. "Hey, honey," a woman's voice said. "Did you remember to pick up milk?" I froze. It was my wife's voice. My real wife, Ellen. She was back in Vancouver. She was safe, Ellen. I choked out. "The kids miss you, Mike. Why haven't you called? We're waiting for you. Just open the door and come home." Tears pricked my eyes. It sounded exactly like her. The inflection, the warmth. "You're not her," I sobbed. "She's in Vancouver. I'm right outside, Mike. I'm cold. The kids are cold. Let us in." Then, a child's voice joined in. "Daddy, open the door." My son. The psychological torture was precise. They were pulling memories from my head. They were using the radio frequencies to tap into. "What? My phone," my brain. I slammed the handset against the desk, shattering the casing. Shut up, the voices stopped. Then a new sound came from the floor. Scratch, scratch from under the floorboards. From the compartment I had just opened, I looked down. The demolition panel wasn't sealed from below. There were gaps for the wiring. A long, pale finger poked up through the gap near the red lever. It wiggled, testing the air. They were under the booth. They were climbing up through the structure itself. I racked the shotgun. "Get away from the bomb," I growled. I aimed at the floor and fired. The buckshot slammed into the steel floor, ricocheting dangerously around the small booth. The blast obliterated the pale finger, sending a spray of black ichor up through the gap. A muffled screech came from beneath the floor plates, a sound like grinding gears and tearing meat. "Got you," I snarled. I grabbed a roll of duct tape from the desk and slapped it over the gap, layering it thick. It wouldn't hold them forever, but it would buy me seconds. The temperature in the booth was plummeting. My breath was now a thick cloud of fog in the red emergency light. Frost was forming on the inside of the shutters. I huddled back in the corner, gun trained on the floor. I was shivering violently, but whether from the cold or the terror, I couldn't tell. Then the radio crackled again. I had smashed the handset, but the base unit's speaker was still intact. "Sergeant Michael Miller," a voice said. I stiffened. It wasn't my wife this time. It wasn't the monster. It was me. It was my own voice, not a recording. It was speaking in real time, with my current inflection, my current fear. "Stop fighting, Mike," my own voice said. "It's exhausting, isn't it? The cold, the fear. Just lie down. Close your eyes." I stared at the radio. It was like looking in an auditory mirror. "Who are you?" I whispered. "I'm you," the voice replied. "The version of you that opened the door. The version that is warm. We are all connected, Mike. The biomass shares everything. Memories, pain, pleasure. You're a parasite," I spat. "Parasite, no. We are the next step. Look at you freezing in a tin can, eating processed food. Alone. We are never alone. Join the chorus, Mike. The water is warm. I'd rather freeze. Would you?" My voice laughed. It was a chilling sound, my own laugh, stripped of all joy. "What about your family, Ellen? The kids? If you join us, we can bring them into the fold. We can make them immortal. Or," the voice dropped an octave, "or we can find them. Vancouver isn't that far. We can swim, Mike. We can swim all the way down the coast." The threat hung in the air. "You touch them, and it'll kill every last one of you," I screamed, losing control. "With what?" "A shotgun and 12 shells. We are legion." The radio clicked off. Silence returned, but it was different now. The banging on the walls had stopped completely. The scratching under the floor had ceased. It felt like the eye of a storm. I looked at the demolition panel. I still needed the code. Without it, the explosives were useless. I needed to find the code. I began tearing the booth apart. I ripped drawers out of the desk. I pulled books off the shelf. I tore the sock binder apart, looking for hidden pages. Nothing then. I saw it. Where I had ripped the rubber mat off the floor to access the panel, I noticed a loose floorboard in the corner, under the heater I had kicked. It was scratched. Someone had carved something into the metal with a knife. I crawled over, shining my light on the scratches. It wasn't a code. It was an arrow, pointing under the heater. I grabbed the heavy heater unit and heaved it aside. Beneath it, taped to the underside of the floorboard, was a small leather-bound notebook. It looked old. The leather was cracked. I opened it. The first page was written in shaky handwriting. Log of Private J. Reynolds. "If you're reading this, I'm dead. And you're the new meat." I sat on the freezing floor, the notebook trembling in my gloved hands. The light from my headlamp cut across the yellowed pages, illuminating the desperate scroll of the man who had sat in this exact spot before me. Private Reynolds. The name sounded familiar, maybe from a plaque in the mess hall or a file I had glossed over during orientation. Missing in action, presumed drowned. I turned the page. Entry E. They told me this was a border crossing. A checkpoint to keep smugglers out. Bullshit. You don't build a bridge this big for smugglers, and you don't reinforce a guard booth with 2 inches of steel plating to stop cigarette runners. Entry C. I saw them tonight. The Pale Walkers. They came up from the river. They look like us, but they move like water. They don't have bones, I swear. I saw one squeeze through a drain pipe. The handwriting grew more erratic as the entries went on. The ink was smudged, as if Reynolds had been writing with sweaty or bloody hands. Entry Shar. I found the files. The old files from the Bosch mails. They tried to burn them, but they missed a box in the storage locker under the bridge. This isn't the border. It's a lid. Entry Shu, the town on the north side. Fort Harmony. It wasn't abandoned. It was infected. Some kind of Cold War experiment gone wrong. Project Whiteout. They were trying to make soldiers who could survive the cold, who could survive anything. They succeeded, but they couldn't control them. I paused, my breath hitching. Biological weapons. That explained the skin suits. The mimicry, they were designed for infiltration. They were designed to replace us. Entry Arsher, the bridge. It's not just a bridge, it's a feeding tube. Every week, the supply truck comes. Sometimes it brings food for me. Sometimes it drives past the booth. It goes to the north side. And it comes back empty. They're feeding them, keeping them placated, keeping them on that side of the river. My stomach churned. The supply runs. The truck I saw earlier. It wasn't bringing me supplies. It was bringing them supplies. And when the truck driver Dave had been taken, he became part of the supply chain. I flipped to the end of the journal. The last few pages were stuck together with something brown and flaky. Dried blood. Entry Arshabah. They stopped feeding them. Budget cuts. Or maybe they want to see what happens when the test subjects get hungry. I know what happens. They come for me. Entry Arshajo. I found the code. The Scorch code. They changed it on the server, but I saw the tech punch it in. He wrote it down on the inside of the junction box on the catwalk. If you need to blow this bridge, kid, you have to go outside. You have to go to the junction box on the first support piling. It's a suicide run, but it's the only way to stop them. I stared at the words, the junction box on the first support piling. It wasn't in the booth. The keypad in the floor was just the arming mechanism. The actual code input, the manual override, was outside, exposed, on the catwalk. I looked at the diagram Reynolds had sketched. The junction box was 50 feet away, 50 feet across an icy metal grate, in the dark, surrounded by monsters. I closed the notebook. I understood now. The military wasn't sending help because I was part of the containment. I was the canary in the coal mine. If I died, they would know the containment had failed. They would probably airstrike the bridge at dawn, but by dawn, it would be too late. If these things got across, if they reached the highway, they could reach the nearest town in hours. And with their ability to mimic, to wear skin, they would be unstoppable. I checked my watch. Shanwunamdian, 4 hours until sunrise. I stood up. My legs were stiff from the cold. The booth was freezing now, the temperature inside matching the temperature outside. The frost on the shutters was thick. I looked at the demolition panel in the floor. The red lever was waiting. Arm the system, input the code, pull the lever. Step E was easy. I flipped the safety cover on the panel and punched the arm button. A green light blinked on. Step R required me to leave the box. I grabbed the shotgun. I checked my pockets. I had a flare gun, a knife, and the last of my courage. "Okay, Reynolds," I whispered to the ghost of the man who died here. "Let's finish what you started." I walked to the door. I could hear them outside, breathing, waiting. I took a deep breath of freezing air. I unlocked the deadbolt. The deadbolt slid back with a heavy clunk that sounded like a gunshot in the silent booth. Immediately, the breathing outside stopped. They knew. I didn't hesitate. I couldn't. If I thought about what was waiting for me on the other side of that steel door, I would freeze. And freezing meant dying. I kicked the door open. It swung outward, hitting something soft with a wet thud. I didn't look. I stepped out onto the metal catwalk, shotgun raised, and fired blindly into the darkness to my left. Boom. The muzzle flash illuminated a nightmare. The catwalk was swarming with them, pale, naked figures crouching on the railings, hanging from the support beams, clinging to the mesh floor. They looked like mannequins made of wet dough, their features smooth and indistinct until they opened their mouths to reveal those rows of needle teeth. The blast caught one of them in the chest. It didn't scream. It just folded backward, tumbling over the railing and plummeting into the black water below. "Move!" I screamed at myself. I turned right, sprinting toward the first support piling. The wind hit me like a physical hammer, tearing at my parka, trying to throw me off the bridge. The cold was instant agony, freezing the sweat on my face. A hand shot out from beneath the catwalk railing, grabbing my ankle. I tripped, slamming hard onto the metal grate. The shotgun skittered away, sliding across the ice-slick steel. I kicked out, my heavy boot connecting with a face. I felt bone crunch. The hand let go. I scrambled up, leaving the shotgun. I didn't have time for it. I needed the junction box. It was 20 feet ahead, a gray metal box mounted on the concrete pillar. I ran. Shadows lunged at me from the periphery. I felt claws rake across the back of my parka, shredding the fabric but missing the skin. I felt hot breath on my neck. "Mike," a voice whispered in my ear. "Don't do it, Mike." It was Ellen's voice again. Perfect, terrified. "Daddy, please." My son's voice cried out from the darkness ahead. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, forcing the image of my family out of my mind. "You're not real," I roared. I reached the pillar. The junction box was frozen shut with a thick layer of ice. I grabbed my combat knife and started hacking at the ice. Chunks flew off, stinging my face. Thump, thump. They were closing in. I could hear their wet footsteps on the grate behind me. I hacked harder. The blade chipped the paint. The latch was exposed. I yanked the door open. Inside was a keypad, a manual override. I fumbled for the notebook in my pocket, but my gloves were too thick. I ripped the gloves off with my teeth, exposing my bare hands to the 40 below air. The skin instantly began to burn. I pulled the notebook out. Entry Arshjo. The code was scribbled in the margin, CC Yobarin. I punched the numbers in. My fingers were stiff, numb, 7-4, 1. A weight slammed into my back. I was thrown forward, my face smashing into the junction box. I tasted blood. I spun around, knife in hand. Standing over me was Dave, or what was left of him. The skin suit was tattered, hanging in strips. The creature underneath was visible, a mass of gray muscle and black eyes. It grabbed my wrist, twisting it. The knife fell. No code, it hissed. No boom. It raised a clawed hand to rip my throat out. I looked past it to the railing, the flare gun in my pocket. I couldn't reach it with my pinned hand, but my other hand was free. I grabbed the flare gun, jammed the barrel into the creature's exposed gut, and pulled the trigger. Whoosh. The magnesium flare ignited instantly. It didn't explode. It burned. It burned at 10 degrees inside the creature's body. The monster shrieked a sound that shattered the night. It released me, staggering back, black smoke pouring from its mouth. It toppled over the railing, a falling star plunging into the river. I turned back to the keypad. 8-0. Enter. A green light flashed on the box. Charges primed. I didn't wait. I turned and sprinted back toward the booth. The monsters were confused by the flare, by the fire. They hesitated. That hesitation was my only chance. I reached the booth door. I dove inside, slamming it shut and throwing the deadbolt. I crawled to the floor panel, to the red lever. I grabbed it with both bleeding hands. For Reynolds, I whispered. I pulled the lever. I yanked the lever down. It locked into place with a mechanical chunk. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. No sound, no explosion, just the wind howling outside and the frantic beating of my own heart. Had it failed? Had the cold frozen the detonators? Then the world ended. Crack. It wasn't the boom. It was the sound of the earth splitting open. The noise was so loud it didn't register as sound. It registered as pressure. My ears popped. The air was sucked out of the booth. Then came the gravity. The booth lurched violently to the left. The floor tilted at a 45-degree angle. The bridge supports were blowing outside the window. I saw the impossible. The massive steel girders of the bridge were shearing apart. The concrete pillars were crumbling. The entire span of the bridge, hundreds of tons of steel, and asphalt was falling. And I was falling with it. The sensation of weightlessness hit me. The booth was no longer attached to the world. It was a metal box plummeting into the abyss. I grabbed the desk, holding on for dear life as the world spun. Through the reinforced glass, I saw them. The pale walkers. They were falling too. Dozens of them. They flailed in the air. Their limbs thrashing, silent screams on their mimic faces. The flare I had shot into Dave was still burning as he fell, a red streak illuminating the chaos. Then impact. The booth hit the water. It wasn't a splash. It was a collision. The reinforced steel groaned and buckled. The glass cracked but held. We went under. Black water engulfed the windows. The darkness was absolute. The booth sank like a stone, dragging me down into the freezing depths of the MacKenzie River. I was trapped, underwater, in a steel coffin. Water began to spray in through the vents, through the crack in the door. It was freezing liquid ice. I scrambled to the ceiling, which was now the floor as the booth rolled over. I needed to get out. If I stayed in here, I would drown or freeze. I grabbed the emergency hatch handle on the roof. Now the floor, open. It wouldn't budge. The pressure of the water was holding it shut. Come on, I screamed, bubbles escaping my lips as the water level rose to my chest. Open. I braced my feet against the desk and pulled with every ounce of strength I had left. My muscles screamed, my frostbitten hands bled. Creak. The hatch gave an inch. Water rushed in faster. I took a deep breath. filling my lungs with the last pocket of air, and pushed. The hatch flew open. The river rushed in. I was swept out of the booth, tumbling into the freezing current. The cold was paralyzing. It hit me like a shockwave, seizing my muscles. I couldn't swim. I couldn't move. I drifted in the darkness, suspended in the black void. Below me, I saw the wreckage of the bridge settling on the riverbed. I saw the bodies of the pale walkers sinking, their movements sluggish in the cold. But one of them wasn't sinking. It was swimming toward me. It was the woman, the first one, the one with the smile. She moved through the water like a shark, her mouth open, revealing those rows of needle teeth. She was coming to finish the job. I tried to kick, but my legs were dead weight. She reached me. Her cold hands wrapped around my throat. She pulled me close, her face inches from mine. She smiled. And then, a massive piece of debris, a twisted steel girder, drifted down from above. It slammed into her back, pinning her against the riverbed. She shrieked a stream of bubbles and released me. The current caught me. It dragged me away from the wreckage, away from the monster, away from the bridge. I tumbled through the dark water, my consciousness fading. The last thing I saw was the faint light of the moon filtering through the ice above. Then blackness. I don't know how long I was in the water. Minutes, hours. Time doesn't exist when you're dead. I woke up coughing up black water. I was lying on a bank of jagged ice and snow. The river was behind me, churning and dark. The bridge was gone, just two broken stumps of concrete jutting out of the fog on either side of the abyss. I was on the south side, the safe side. I tried to stand, but my legs collapsed. I crawled. I crawled through the snow until I hit asphalt. The highway. Headlights appeared in the distance. A truck. A real truck. I waved my arms, my movements jerky and uncoordinated. The truck slowed, it stopped. The driver rolled down the window. An old man with a thick beard. He looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Help," I croaked. "Bridge down." The driver didn't move to help me. He stared at me. He stared at my face. "Jesus, mister," he whispered. "What happened to you?" "Hypothermia," I rasped. "Need heat." He didn't unlock the door. He put the truck in reverse. "Hey," I shouted. "Don't leave me." He floored it. The truck spun around and sped away, tires screeching on the ice. I watched him go, confused. Why was he afraid? I was a soldier. I was a survivor. I stumbled to the side of the road where a metal sign stood. Warning, bridge closed. The sign was reflective. I looked at my reflection in the metal. The face staring back at me wasn't Mike Miller. My skin was pale, translucent. My eyes were gone, replaced by milky white orbs. And when I opened my mouth to scream, I didn't see human teeth. I saw rows of needles, translucent, sharp, receding back into my throat. I touched my face. It felt cold, rubber. I hadn't survived the water. The water was infected. The black sludge. It had entered my lungs when I almost drowned. It had changed me. I wasn't the survivor. I was the breach. And now I was on the south side. And I was so hungry.